We say in this market, we have to be deep. We have to help the country in the energy transition. And to help the country, you can do one thing. You have to bring the whole transition forward. And the whole is decarbonisation, renewable, electrification, ready for the grids to be so smart and to support the transition. So this is the deep position that we have.
Hello and welcome to Energy Unplugged by Aurora. This podcast features various experts from Aurora having in-depth conversations with key industry leaders, policymakers and academics from all over the world. It explores the hottest topics across the energy market and gives a unique perspective on major energy issues.
Welcome to Energy Unplugged. I'm John Feddersen, founder and chief executive of Aurora. And today we'll be continuing to discuss the theme of the role of the world's largest utilities in decarbonising society. To discuss this topic, my guest is the CFO of Enel, which is one of, if not the world's largest listed utility. He entered Enel and the electricity sector as the CFO of Enel Green Power, so has been focused on renewables and their development since well before it was a fashionable thing to do. He's also the co-chair of the United Nations CFO Taskforce for the Sustainable Development Goals, so very busy in a number of roles. My guest on the show today is Alberto De Paoli, CFO of Enel. Welcome, Alberto.
Thank you.
And it's great to have you on the show. I touched upon your background, Alberto, and how you entered the utility sector through Enel Green Power, or into the power sector really through Enel Green Power. Can you say a bit about why you moved from the telecoms industry, which is where you carved out your career, into the power sector and green power specifically?
Well, it was in 28 when I made the change. Well, so I often say I am a lucky guy because I entered into the telecommunication sector because it was my first job. So not a very clear choosing a sector. But I joined this sector the time in which everything was about to happen. So it was I don't say a dead field, but almost dead. Then sudden internet, mobile phones, liberalization, so in a row, and everything changed. So I lived and experienced all the changes related to the innovation that today we have. And when I move on power, I found exactly the same initial trends that now are changing our sector. So I'm lucky for this. So my word is related to startups and changing things, and so it's I fit perfectly with this.
And what was it? Just really interesting, and I suppose lucky if you do it once, but there's some skill involved, presumably, if you do it twice. So you've got to give it credit for that. Were there aspects of the energy space that reminded you of telecoms in the 90s at the time? Was it sort of that, did you see something that said, hey, something's going on here and this is where I want to be for the next phase of my career?
I would say almost everything. So with different names and so different times and different business concepts, but almost everything. So the trend of transformation is almost the same in every field you may stay. And I think so the attitude to look at the very beginning of trends when no one believe in it, but you have already saw it in another field, so you can easily pass to this new field. So when I came in power sector, I was put on renewable energies. Renewable energies at that time, at the very beginning, was a financial bet. So there were already a bubble, the first bubble because markets every time anticipate a little bit too much the time in which these new things will become mainstream. And it was the time already. But so I saw there the same we did on the mobile phones at the beginning. So the telecommunication didn't understand mobile phones. So they created niche, they created listed companies, they did it. Then mobile phones came back and become the telecommunication. And exactly I saw in renewables exactly this trend. And it was this exactly as this happened. Now we are moving towards different things, like the fact that the old system, and we can touch it, will be changed. Will change also the market design we are used to use in the energy, because it was designed for a different system. Now we are in the middle, and it's still so present, but we already know that in the future we will have to change the market design. Mobility. So the first mobility in energy is in the electric vehicles business. For the first time, utilities will go through a mobility offer with all the aspects related to roaming, infrastructure, coverage. So words that I am accustomed to in telecommunications. So I can give you other examples, but so you understand that, so you can do this
Interesting.
parallel.
Bill Gates famously said, we tend to, on your point about the bubble, we tend to overestimate the rate of progress over 2 years, but underestimate it over 10 years. That sort of, and human beings in general, I think, aren't very good with the second derivative or compound. People talk about compound interest as a miracle.
If you want to smile, in telecommunication, I gave at the beginning of my history 2 predictions. Mobile phones will reach maximum 30% penetration, and short messages at the time will not a business that will be so a profitable business. No one will use it. Okay, these were my own predictions. So then I understood that. So the attitude towards the future has to be different.
Yeah, it was reassuring. As someone who has founded a business based on long-term forecasting and analysis, it doesn't surprise me. It's a very hard game to get right. Could you just say a little bit of? I mean, so you're CFO of Enel Green Power in 2008. Enel's built a global kind of platform of renewables assets all over the world. How was developing renewable assets, I mean, say in Europe, different back then to it is now? What were the key? Is it broadly the same skill set, or was it a very? And you talked about market design. What were the key differences between being in that industry then and being in it now?
Well, it was completely different. So one for all. So the cost of 1 megawatt hour produced at that time was around 300 euros per megawatt hour. Okay. Now we are producing energy at 30, 40 euros. So clearly at that time, the need of subsidies on everything to have it, to have the first investments was the key. And in fact, everyone was fixed in countries in which the subsidies were present and so on and so forth. I would say the only real relevant things pertaining us at that period was, well, guys, so we have to create a development capacity out of this, because clearly sooner or later it will go to an end. And if we are not building other kind of development, we will stay stuck in nothing. That's why we decided to go global and to try to find other way to develop renewables, and to say the only way we have to follow is the fact that this technology will have to produce energy at lower cost versus the technologies that we have today, gas, coal, and everything. This was exactly what we followed at the time, and now the industry is there. So now we have a different way to develop renewables. Now we desperately need energy from renewables to substitute plants and also to feed the incredible increase that we are experiencing and we will expect because of the electrification of consumption. That is one of the main trends of the next years.
So Alberto, I've heard you in the past talk about ensuring sustainability is at the center of your business model. I'm really interested to understand, practically, what does that feel like at Enel? How did you come to that view, and what are you doing about it?
Well, it was 2015 when we made this sharp choice, and we were into a different business model at that time. So we observed this business model, and we observed the trends that at that time were not so clear, but so in our vision they were, and we decided to change completely the way we develop and do business. Ethical reasons, yes, because so I think we are an ethical group of managers. And on the other side, a clear business perspective analysis. So we were in technologies and in business that were harming population, were harming climate, and there are no conditions in which you think you may do investments that will last for 30 years, because so sooner or later this investment will not return anymore. So we will decide to change completely the way we develop. So we focused on the leader project, non-army population, working with the population to create shared value, and on the other side, focusing on renewables, on generation, and on electrification of consumption. This, so for us, was clear at the time that incredible market will be open to us in the future, and are exactly the market in which we work. So generation, and so selling energy. So this was the fact. To say we position our company into this. That's why we say it is a business choice. And so it's an ethical choice that is driven by the fact that the business will be very good.
It's an interesting take, right? That's not always the answer of, this is where demand is, green is what consumers want. Green is what politicians want. This is where we're going. It's sometimes a different answer to, we wanted to be good corporate citizens. There was pressure from capital markets, and we did that. It's a slightly interesting take on on sort of why put sustainability at the center of the business.
Well, so we have a slogan that is not a slogan. It's not blah, blah, blah. So it's a slogan in which we believe and we will work in. That is, sustainability is value. And sustainability is value for us is the fact that out of an ethical position, if we don't create and show that a sustainable business choice is a business choice, and that it creates value, and that everyone will have to pursue a sustainable business choice, or because you are an ethical guy, but mainly because you are focusing on creating value, it is the only choice you may do starting from now onward. So we ask the market to say, guys, you have to give me value that I can show to the world after this choice. When we made this choice, our value was 35 billion euros. Now we touched the 90 billion. Now we are working at 70, 75 for COVID and other things. But so we have almost doubled the value in 5 years. And that's, I think, is the final things that we asked the market gave us.
Yeah, no, you were clearly right. I think no one disagrees with the fact that you're right. It was, I mean, just going back to 2015 though, right? So there's two, and it comes back to the challenges of long-term forecasting, right? You had two convictions, at least it sounds like, 100% electrical power in the energy system, or very high electrical power in the energy system. So that's a sort of molecules CCUS not playing a massive role, and also this idea that we would get to net zero and that sustainability would be where the world wanted to go. How did you get conviction on these things as a board, as an executive team? What was it that was the light bulb moment where you said, we think the momentum is going to pick up more and more on this? Because not everyone was of that view. There are a lot of companies in 2015 who said renewables, they're too expensive, it's a flash in the pan. No governments had committed to net zero really at that point. We were still talking at sort of 80% decarbonisation by 2050. What was the evidence base, or what made you? Was it just an educated bet where you thought, we want to map out this space for ourselves?
Well, so on one side, so remember my past experience. We have touched on telecommunication and all the mistakes made in looking at the future. Some of this attitude that my CEO is exactly like me or more than me. So spotting weak signals and to say it's sure that they will become mainstreams in some time. So don't care about projections, and because every year you will see this increasing, and okay, so it's clear. We don't know the time, but we don't know that we go there. So because of this, it's better to position ourselves, because having 1 or 2 years in advance is better than to stay 5 years and delay.
Yeah,
so that was the attitude we had. You have to be a little bit brave, okay? That's so. I would think we are brave guys. So we took our risks and we go ahead. But so at the end, when that technology, and so then the people and also the pushing on this was clear. Technology was already here. That was the very, very relevant things. So we have the technology to solve the problem. So that's so, and so because if now we were here without the technology able to solve the problem, we guys may have a very, very big problem. But it is not, because technology was already ready. Not at the time in which we started, but if you have faith on the trend you saw in other fields and in other time, that you go there. So now an electric vehicle, I don't know, cost, you say 30% more than a normal vehicle. Batteries are giving you 400 kilometers in your car, and you have some difficulties in recharging the car because you have not a huge amount of recharging station. 2-3 years from now, we already know it. We saw it in other fields. So it's only a little technological adjustments.
Yeah,
everything is ready. That was our fate, and so the way in which decided to move sharply there.
Yeah. And I mean, the EV one is, again, I think everyone says it's obvious now, 75% of new vehicles in Norway are electric vehicles. Charging points are, the tipping point. It feels like the number of people who think the tipping point has been reached is there. But, as you say, the technology hasn't really changed in the last couple of years. You just sometimes need to see it to believe it, really, I suppose. Can you talk about, and I think it's interesting, and someone will write about the history of this period of the history of the utilities, but it was that 2 or 3 year head start seems to have been all the difference when it comes to enterprise value for utilities in the sector, right? I mean, you look at, the Orsteds, the Enels, maybe Iberdrolas, EDP, who could map out, lots of development sites and build network assets, all these. Now, of course, interest rates have declined and all sorts of yield compression and things like that. Compare it to what the oil and gas majors are now paying for access to assets, and 2 or 3 years and being there first makes a massive difference, I think, when you look at the financial performance.
Absolutely. And I think, if I may add, we are at the very beginning. So the metric evaluation for utilities are still related to the old way to look at these utilities. Then you have some period in which people are looking at the foreseeable future. Other times they come back and looking at the valuation. So it's a period of this. But so after this, I think that the market will understand really where the value is and where the value is going.
So that's it leads me to another question I wanted to ask about sort of international scale in utilities. And it seems like one of the features of that old valuation model versus the new valuation model was that utilities tended to be national. You were very closely linked to government. You were serving a social purpose. You were sometimes, in Italy, a sort of a very big role in the retail market, for example, for Enel. And so people, and often you were state owned or you'd only recently been privatized. And so you had these national companies. Some of them went international. It seems like there's pressure on all utilities now in Europe to be international. SSE's, which was a sort of a British Irish company, is now looking at Japan and various other things like that. Can you say a bit, what do you think was the driving force behind internationalization? What made it a good idea to go from your core competency of like engaging with government, providing a social good, all of those things, to building renewables and owning networks in South America?
Well, I say it's at the very beginning of things. So something happens that give you the spark to do something, and then along the path you find different reasons from the beginning. I'm saying that Enel was an Italian company at the time in which a new law for competition decided that Enel had to sell a big part of its generation fleet, and so other assets like transmission and others. So at that time, you had a problem to say, okay, I'm getting money because I'm forced to sell, but what I do? So I give back money to shareholders. I use money to try to find another space to balance this loss in Italy. This was the first choice, was related and pushed from this. And Enel started this internationalization of the company. But then we found in this global aspect of a multinational like us, the composition of what you say and new trends that are coming, because one of the new trends of utilities is that also in utilities, the platformization of the business is beginning. So now we work with platforms that manage the business the same way in all the countries in which we are. The same way, the level that doesn't need any localization of the business. But we found that, in distribution, 60% of the business in distribution is the same. So all the distributors in the world do the same things. So because it's the base, then you have the country-based specific activities related to regulation, related to specific relation and others. And this is the same, Enel. Enel is our division on the beyond commodity services. And Enel works with a platform everywhere. So you have this, like Amazon, like others business we are accustomed to look at. Also utilities are going there. And it's clear that the world is the place for a platform. On the other side, you have specific aspects of each country. We have a matrix organization. We have global business line and countries. This cross is what we think is the best way to manage globalization and localization. It's not an easy organization. You need to be a big effort to make this organization working. But so we think that is the best fit. And that's why we maintain a global print, but we are focusing in integrating the business we have in the specific countries in which we work. These two things is for the time being, so a key of our success in the last years.
And is a corollary then that you need to be deep in these markets? You know, is it that you can be broad, but you need to be broad and deep rather than broad and shallow?
Absolutely, yes. In fact, our global print is to be deep in this market. In fact, if you see our presence, we say in this market, we have to be deep. We have to help the country in the energy transition, and to help the country, you can do one thing. You have to bring the whole transition forward. And the whole is decarbonization, renewable, electrification, ready for the grids to be so smart and to support the transition. So this is the deep position that we have. And we are on a global, and often we do prefer to have companies listed, because we think that in these countries it's better to be listed. Notwithstanding, for us is a more difficult management, because it's not so easy than to have a 100% company. But sharing this is important, because market signals are important for government, for regulators, for ourselves, and because this is a very, very sensitive work that we have to do in the countries. On the other side, we do prefer to stay more light, because we are not already integrated. So we want to try a lot of things in different countries, not investing a lot. That's why we have this stewardship business model, to have others with us, helping us to move around on a different number of countries, to choose after if we can integrate another country as a presence and start the same. This is more or less the way we work.
Okay, interesting. And it's sort of some utilities or oil and gas companies will have the country manager as essentially policy relations or government relations or something like that. It sounds like it's a broader role, right? I mean, it could even be the local country manager is the CEO of a listed company or something like that. What would the key roles of the Enel country lead in Brazil or whatever it is be?
Well, look, the country role that we assign to our country manager is they are the stakeholders manager. So they work working around all the stakeholders that you may have in a country. You name it. So government, regulators, fiscal authorities, customers, and they are on the other side. So the guys that will drive the overall capital budgeting, the need of a certain development in the country, working with the global line, and so presenting the fact that those countries have some needs, and so may have some value return that are not only based on the profit side, that is relevant, very relevant, but so the value return is bigger than the profit itself, that is the position in the country and other things. Yeah. These two hats is the difficult role that a country manager of Enel has to comply
Interesting. With. Okay, it's really interesting. As you said, it sounds like a complicated structure, but I totally understand the problem, the challenge you're trying to solve in terms of some of those diseconomies of scale in being global. I'd like to zoom out a little bit away from Enel and towards the industry more generally. And I suppose it relates to something you said before. So I want to talk a bit about ESG investing, which is, environment, social governance type investing. What do you think has grown a lot, this area, the amount of funds raised, the amount of emphasis from investors. You probably, your capital markets days get a bunch of questions about this, or more than you did back in 2008. What do you think has driven it? Is it returns? Is it just the world becoming more aware of that companies can play a broader role than just profit generators?
Well, I think it's a balanced composition of what you said. Like everything, I think at the beginning, so new things are looked in two ways, scaring on one side and with interest with the other one. Then you have a phase in which you have it, okay? And this was the phase we experienced. You have it. Companies were showing, so we have it. So we are ESG compliant, and it was a sum up of things important, but often not related with the business you do. So it's this is my business. On the right side, on the left side, I have a number of KPIs, and this was the second. At that time, the world and investors were desperately seeking at some definition. That is in the human being, a new thing need to be defined. Not the thing you are accustomed to. They are not defined. You are fine naming some names for the new things. So sustainability is good, but what the rest is not sustainable. I don't know. So then you say, okay, these are sustainable investment. Fine. But the rest is difficult. And so on, so forth and so forth. And in this period, everyone has a different name for the same things. So we had 100 operators, 1,000 operators. We had algorithms that were saying, you are good, you are not. So this still is the period, one period of, a little bit of confusion. Everything is normal in the human being. So we usually do this. So we go through this path. Then, when the things are becoming mainstream, they will, then will be standardized in, the way you don't name it sustainable, rather you will name it the new business. The new way to do business, not sustainable. So it's business, but it's a new way that is sustainable. Okay.
Yeah. So clearly you think we're not at the end of the journey on sort of ESG criteria and the way we calculate and compute these things, and even the extent to which we calculate or compute them. And I think it was a theme we discussed at the Aurora Spring Forum recently. And I suppose my challenge was, look at a company like Shell, and it's sort of, it's done about 40 billion in divestments, and it's done about 8 billion in investments in green technology. And I think you would say a lot of that is driven by capital market preferences. We had CEO of SSE and the CEO of RWE, both of whom generate power from fossil fuels in Germany and the UK, saying there's probably a capital markets benefit in divesting some of these assets. And certainly it would be very difficult for us to build new assets along these lines, even if the market signals were very strong to build them. What would you, if there was one thing you could change about, you turn up to your investor days, if there's one thing you could change about the way people think about ESG criteria, is there something on your mind where you say we're not quite getting this right? And I suppose the one, just as context, the Markus Kleber version of this is, I think, probably something like, we don't want to get rid of fossil fuels tomorrow. We want to be Paris aligned, or we want to be aligned with 1.5 degrees of warming or 2 degrees of warming, but we're still going to eat beef tomorrow. We're still going to fly in airplanes tomorrow. A sort of nuance around not being black and white, but being trajectory consistent was probably his answer. But yeah, is there anything you would change, Alberto?
Well, not because Marcus is a friend, but I fully agree with him. So it's clear that we have to rush. That's sure. So we have no time. And also we have no time to say today who is good and who is not, because so doesn't matter a lot. What matters today is that we all rush to go from A to B. And I think that this rush will have to be within so what the ESG judgments and the investors' behavior will have to be complied with. I want only to stress one point that I think it's for us in our history is relevant. You know that we invented the sustainable linked bond. So we were the first issuer of sustainable linked bonds. Why we do it? Because at the time we decided that we are not showing some projects, sustainable projects, but all our effort and business is sustainable, I can name some projects to say that these are green, because I'm targeting a rush to go there where I want to stay and where it is certified that I'm working for a better planet, okay? So I say, so financial instruments are not available because I want to show the people and investors the trend. If you give me money, you have to be sure that I go there. Then I'm gonna assure you that if I miss this target, I'm gonna pay more. And this was how the instruments work. So you give me money at a discount because I deserve a discount because of my business model. But if I miss the target, I'm gonna pay you more. Philosophical question is, well, okay, I am an investor. What I have to hope that you reach the target because I with you, I want to save the world, or so I have to hope that you miss the target, I'm gonna earning more. So this is a philosophical question, but this is not the right question, because what I am showing, if that I reach this level of emissions, my company will be more profitable and less risky. That's a link. I'm gonna pay you more, not because I am not so good as I said, but because I'm giving you a company that, because has missed the sustainable target, will be less profitable and more risky, and because of this I'm gonna pay you more, not in the different way. If we link these two things, we will win. Yeah. And this is what the investors have to understand and push. I understand that investors prefer to have standardized things because they have to sell off the shelf. But it is the time to put a little bit more effort in looking out of the next 1 or 2 years, because we are living in a transition that never happened in the world. So we have to change the concept in which we judge and value the companies looking forward towards the transition. That's my very point.
Yeah, and I mean, I see that for what it's worth. I mean, Aurora does a lot of work on specific assets, and I think you look at discount rates for different assets, right? And a naive understanding of, say, a gas plant versus a wind farm, both merchant, is, hey, these are exactly the same risks. It's the wholesale power price. It's the carbon price. That's what's driving the risk in my project. So I should value their risks differently. But when you go to borrow money or you go to raise capital, suddenly you add 5 to 10% to your discount rate for the gas plant compared to the renewables plant, despite the fact that the market risks are the same. So I think you're already seeing this pretty clearly, that policy risk and the sustainability risk and all of those things is being reflected in asset values, even if it's not yet in the cash flows in the market.
Absolutely, but if I may add something, so what are you proposing to your customers in the future, looking at a renewable development? You are proposing to your customer and to the country in which you work that the country will maybe energy independent at the time in which you will end your job and your hard work, and to the customers that they will not suffer any volatility of price. Because if you do a system that is producing and balancing with storage and others, so the new system, you are offering energy at a very low cost and with no volatility. All these two things, and then on top, you are saving the world, your country, your air, and other. So how you can say, no, thank you, I'm not interested in it. So how you can do it. So that's a fate and that we see in looking at trend in the future. Now, a lot of things will have to be put in the right way to support something that talking me and you is say, okay, so we don't have to talk anymore. So it's clear that we have to go there.
Yeah, interesting. We're coming to the end, and I'd like to just close it out with a few questions where I basically ask you about a concept in the energy transition and whether you think it's overrated or underrated as a concept. It's a way of sort of getting it. Anyone can say something is good or bad, but when someone buys Enel shares, they want to know whether it's overrated or underrated in price. So it's the same sort of concept here. So let me fire through a few. So the first concept is the role of green hydrogen in decarbonising Europe. Do you think it's overrated or underrated, Alberto?
Green hydrogen, because I think the question is the colors are relevant. Green hydrogen, I think, has to be properly rated, looking at the development of technology. Okay, so I think we have to rely on the technology development to understand the real position of green hydrogen. A couple of things for me are relevant. One, you don't have to use green hydrogen when you can use electricity in the final uses. Because so if you go with the equations, you understand that the energy efficiency of using directly energy or using energy to produce hydrogen and then to use it for the final uses is not the same. So electric vehicles, light transportation, everywhere where we can use directly energy is better. Second is that green hydrogen will be needed, one, to substitute the hydrogen we use today. Because today we use hydrogen for chemical industries or for other things, and this is a climate killer. So one of the most important climate killer of today is the hydrogen we produce. So we have to substitute it, and this is relevant. So it's very relevant first step of this industry, and then we have to use it for the hard to abate sector. And in this, I suggest that, like the hydrogen today, that is produced exactly near the needs, the point of consumption, also for the future, it's better to transport water and electricity, because we have already the means to transport it, than to create infrastructure to transport hydrogen. So it's better to try to locate the production near to the final uses that we will use in the future. Okay. That's my point.
Okay, interesting. So power. Before we get too excited about hydrogen, let's see if we can use power first as a sort of good, reasonable summary. Okay, one more of these. So the next concept is the role of Europe as an example to the rest of the world around decarbonisation. So you've got your UN role, obviously. We've got COP26 coming up. How is the role of Europe as an example of decarbonisation for the rest of the world overrated or underrated?
Well, it's properly rated. So Europe is at the center of this transformation, put itself at the center of the transformation, and so is doing the right things. Then I can do some critics at the end of the logium of what Europe is doing, because it's not only the fact of taking the lead to reduce emission, because sometimes we heard, okay, why we have to do this sacrifice when we emit only in 10% of the overall emissions. It's okay. The problem is that your example will trigger other example, and your political position is relevant in the world discussion. But we have not to remember that this is a race for a new technological leadership that will be the leadership in the new markets that today are at the beginning. So it's not only, like I said before, only a sustainable effort, but also to position Europe at the lead of the new markets, the new geopolitics, the new technologies, the new businesses. That's why I think this is an example for the others. And if we will succeed, so we will put Europe there, and we will gather the other in this behavior. So that's a very relevant thing. Only one thing that may be improved, a more holistic approach, like we said before, on the way we go there. So I don't know, green bonds are good, but sustainable linked bonds are an integration of the sustainable finance portfolio needed to move towards the transition. Taxonomy is very good, but so the black and white or the gray area will have to be in some ways defined, because it's not only so good or bad, it's not only green or black, but it's a movement. The transition is a transition. These messages are under elaboration in the EU discussion, and it's relevant then. So these other steps will be done.
So is that to say, just to drill down briefly on that, if there was something in Europe that you would change that could really speed up the energy transition, it would be around sort of the finance industry's approach to sustainable investing, taxonomy within European Commission to sort of enable sort of sustainably linked financial instruments? Or what would be the one thing on your wish list in Europe that would accelerate our decarbonisation?
The main, I'm saying, but I said I would change, not change, but improve. So I think there are complementary things that will have to be put into the table. If you look, you said at the beginning, I am working on the SDG development in the United Nations Global Compact. SDG are targets. So you have a target, zero hunger or our target. The philosophy of this is target. So you have to move towards to reach a target. In Europe, we are mainly based on projects, on definitions. Okay, are two different ways to reach the same objective, the same target. Do we need to have one or another? I say we need both. In fact, my biggest victory in my history, no, I'm joking, but this was relevant. At the beginning, we issued a sustainable linked bond. ECB said we are not going to buy in our program this for technical reason. Okay, then we discussed with them for a long time, and at the end they said, okay, I think that so we are gonna buy also this instrument. So now SDG linked bond are within the purchasing program of the ECB. And they said, I'm gonna buy if they are linked to taxonomy, but also if they are aiming to reach SDG 7 and 13. Big victory for me, because for the first time, one European institution has said, I'm buying on a target base and on a project or definition base. This is the path. I hope that it is clear what is my personal view.
So that's probably a natural note to finish on. Alberto, it was first of all, it was wonderful to hear the really inspirational story of 2015 and putting sustainability at the center. And obviously I've got a personal stake in it, but delighted to hear that forecasting the future and getting that right played a big role in Enel's success. Also fantastic to hear about the innovation that you're doing, in the finance side, but also in the org structure and just how you're thinking about utilities in the future. This is refreshing and exciting. So Alberto De Paoli, thanks so much for taking the time to speak.
Thank you.
That was John Feddersen, founder and chief executive of Aurora, talking to Alberto De Paoli, CFO of Enel. Do keep an eye on our podcast feed for more in-depth conversations with senior members of the energy industry. The best way to do this is to subscribe on whatever platform you use. Thanks for listening and goodbye.